Hello, this is Cecil Sunk here from Hotkeyit.com, and I'm going to show you guys all about force field micro. There are a few ways to place up force fields. You can click on the F button, or you can click on the force field button, and then place a force field one by one. This is probably the absolute worst way you can do it. Then, moving on from actually clicking on the force field button, you can hit the force field hotkey, which is F, and then place one. And then there's two options here. You can hit F lots of times and queue up all your force fields by holding down Shift, just like I did here. I'll show you again. You hold the Shift button, hit F, and then left click, just like so. Or you can actually hit F for each individual force field you place down, which is what I just did here. Either way is perfectly fine. It's a matter of personal preference. I myself like to hit F for each individual force field. It feels like I have a little more control, although a lot of players do like to shift queue them. I feel that shift queuing provides you less control than if you do each force field individually, and so I'd like to recommend that you get used to using your force fields by pressing F and then left click, F left click, for each individual one. In PvZ, there's a very common micro that you need to have mastered down that involves sentries and lings. The idea with the sentries is that if you engage a pack of lings head on, you die pretty convincingly. However, if you add in some micro,
is under attack,
namely force fields surrounding your lings, then you can defeat a pack of lings pretty convincingly. So all you need to do is surround your sentries with a bunch of force fields when the lings get there, and that's it. And of course, if you master this, you can end up losing no sentries, and in this case I lost 3. In order to make your sentry versus ling micro a little easier, you can travel along walls with your sentries. That way you can use the wall that you're traveling next to as a part of your force field wall. That way you can use less force fields in order to keep yourself safe.
not enough energy.
That time I only took a little bit of damage on the shields of one of the sentries. Another really important concept when using sentries is you not only have to force field away from lings, but against better players you actually have to force field away from lings in a little ball and then trap lings so that the lings can't just run away and wait for your force fields to dissipate. If you end up trapping some, then every time the Zerg engages you, you'll actually be punished and take some sort of damage for it. Here's an example where the Protoss just creates a little force field ball and then doesn't trap any of the lings. And the Zerg player smartly runs away. They ended up losing 2 lings, although you used 4 force fields. 2 lings for 4 force fields is a good trade for the Zerg. So instead, you need to engage something like this. Now as the Zerg player tries to run away, they end up losing over half of their army. This ends up being a favorable trade for the Protoss. Most players will throw down 1 force field, but very rarely throw down the second one, preventing a retreat. Against banelings with your sentries, the exact same idea applies as with speedlings, although you have to be more diligent with not letting any holes inside your force field bubble. So you can be a lot more liberal with your force field usage, just to make sure none get inside.
Not enough energy.
And again, try to trap them if you can, in between pockets. Oftentimes in PvZ you'll see sentries used against roaches, or perhaps hydralisks, in conjunction with Colossus. The idea is that you want to minimize the amount of DPS that the enemy army is raining on you and maximize your DPS. If you don't, the battle can be lost pretty convincingly. Instead, if you try to trap the roach ball in a very confined space, your Colossus can deal more damage, more splash damage, as you can get the roaches to stack on top of one another. However, if you don't have the splash damage, your goal is going to be different. Here's to show you what will happen if you don't use your sentries very well. Instead of the previous battle, what you want to do is try to engage in a more closed space. This way you have to use less force fields. What I did in that battle was I tried to engage small pockets as best I could. Instead of fighting all the archers all at once, you have to fight only a few at each given time. I'll try to show that one more time, using the same number of units. When the engagement first starts, you want to force field most of the archers away and engage just a small amount of them. You can see me moving away from these ones in the back. That way I only have to engage a few at each given time.
Can't wait.
Here's how you hit micro against a Terran Bio Ball. First, an example of no micro. And here's an example where you attempt to engage near a choke, or in this instance a wall, so that your force fields can be effective, or more effective than open space. And you can also try to get your immortals to target onto the enemy's marauders.
You gonna been waiting on you.
This last type of battle is a bit more uncommon, but it still does happen, so I'll cover it. Whenever you have long-range units longer than your opponents, you want to lay down a layer of force fields so that your really long-range Colossus, longer-range Stalkers can shoot at them, while the opponent's ranged units are just sitting there mostly doing nothing. So this is especially useful for pushes where you have Colossus and your opponent doesn't. So here's an example of no micro. No micro from the Protoss, that is.
Sure thing.
And here I'll show you how much of a difference the battle can take if you try to force field and keep the opponent's units at bay, and you can let your longer range Colossus deal some damage for a longer period of time. Another common mistake made, or a common mistake made with force fields is you oftentimes let your zealots sit in front of your force fields just to die. And this can be avoided just by simply grabbing your zealots or control clicking your zealots and pulling them back away from your force field. I'm going to exemplify this on a ramp because it's extremely common in PvP and PvT on ramps, but it also does happen quite a bit out in the open as well, not necessarily only on ramps. So the Terran stims up the ramp, you force field, and then you end up letting your zealots die. And now you don't have any zealots, and then if the Terran somehow does get up your ramp, you'll be in a world of pain. And that's exactly what you don't want to happen.
Been waiting on you.
Our allies
So instead,
are being attacked. Our allies' base is under attack.
when you lay down your layer of force fields, and you can tell that your zealots aren't going to be actually hitting any of the enemy units, go ahead and just pull them back. And then, after your force field dissipates, during the next engagement, your zealots can actually stay alive to help you in your battle. If you're engaging into a Zerg base, and I say Zerg base because this is the most common scenario, but it can actually work in any situation ever, and you wait till the opponent's units come out into the open and then lay down your layer of force fields, you actually might be wasting your force fields. For example, I'm coming over to a Terran base, or a Zerg base, and they come out into the open, and then I lay down my force fields, and then engage. And then the battle will just go on however it's going to go on. But the point I want to make is you can oftentimes use structures around you to your advantage. Instead of waiting for the Zerg opponent to come out to you, you can actually use the structures as part of your force field wall.
Our allies' base is under attack.
And that will conclude the video on Force Field Micro. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the Hotkeyit forums, and I'll gladly answer any of them that you have.
Not enough energy.